Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. This is the Ever Forward Mindset Podcast. I am your host, Michael Rebelo. I'm a 20-year-old entrepreneur who chose entrepreneurship over the traditional college path. My goal is to retire my mother and help other Main Street Americans just like her learn about and invest in different investments like multifamily real estate to build long-lasting financial freedom. And in fact, my mother has finally stepped away from her corporate job as of yesterday to join Russell Gray as the chief of staff for the Main Street Media Network and everything he's building. And speaking of Russell Gray, I have him on the show today. Russell, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Well, I'm excited to be here. It's kind of fun being a part of watching your show and your brand take off and just seeing a new young leader for a new generation go out there and put good ideas in the ecosystem and watch how they sprout up and grow.
Absolutely. And it's that the planting of the seed that takes a lot of work, but it also takes a lot of mentorship. But we're going to dive into that a little bit. So Russell, you have been with the Real Estate Guys radio show for a long time. And you're doing, Main Street Media Network. You're doing the Christian Capitalist show. You're doing a lot. And you've been in the real estate industry before. How did you even get into this position? Like, what was the grassroots foundation of you accelerating your future to go from where you were many years ago to where you are now? What is the origin story?
So it's a long story because I'm an old man, but the short of it is I was raised by an entrepreneur, Filipino immigrant who became a high-tech entrepreneur. Unfortunately, my folks divorced when I was a teenager, and so I was really left alone quite a bit, and it turned out to be a bit of a blessing. You learn to fend for yourself. You grow up pretty quick. I latched onto a great gal who became my wife of 41 years. And I was a bit of a train wreck from a spiritual perspective. I wasn't really raised to have any kind of a moral compass. So I went out in the world and thought that life was all about taking and getting as much as I could and having as much fun as I could have. And then I looked around and realized I was hurting a lot of people, and deep down inside I cared about people. And so I came to a place of repentance, and right after that ended up becoming a father, and my wife and I had 5 children together. And one of the things we decided to do, and she decided to do, was homeschool. And in that homeschooling, I eventually became involved in picking out some of the curriculum. And the curriculum had to do with American history, civics, economics. And at the same time, I was starting to make a bunch of money in corporate America, and I was paying a lot of tax, and I was trying to understand tax mitigation strategies. And those two things converged for me into an understanding of our tax system and our financial system. And the light bulb went off when I read a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island, written by a man who's now a good friend of mine, G. Edward Griffin. Back then, I didn't know who he was, but he's a bit of an icon in the arena of patriotism and constitutional freedom. And so I looked at that, and I'm about 35 years old at this point in time, and I thought, somebody's got to do something. I know your story, and I know you looked around, you said, somebody's got to do something. And I felt like the Lord said to me, well, why not you? And so I started trying to think about what could we do, what would work, what could actually make a difference. And first of all, you have to understand what the problem is. So I spent 4 or 5 years really working on that. In 1999, I wrote a business plan, very detailed business model, to build a national education program that was based around financial mentoring. And it was super affordable for the average family. It was Main Street that I cared about. I didn't want to have some high-ticket item, blah, 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 right? So I did that, and I decided to raise venture capital. So I went to these Silicon Valley venture capitalists and tried to raise money, and I would share my mission, my vision, my values. And I had this one guy tell me that he thought I was a bit of a Boy Scout. He kind of laughed at me. And so I realized I did not want these vultures, these vulture capitalists to have my chain. So I said, well, I'm not going to take your money. I got up and I left. And I decided to start a mortgage company. And so I started a mortgage company in 2000 to earn the money I needed to build the program. And I used financial education as a marketing tool to build that company. When I was out looking for faculty, does this sound familiar? Because it's exactly what I'm doing right now.
Exactly.
I met a man named Robert Helms, and Robert was hosting the Real Estate Guys radio show at the time with another co-host. And I went to one of his seminars, and I took my then 17-year-old daughter because I was just started my business. So like your mother, I had just left corporate America, and I'm there as in my early 40s. I think I was 41 years old with my 17-year-old daughter. We go to this seminar, and I saw Robert, and I thought, wow, this guy is really talented. He's super connected. Maybe he'd be interested. My daughter went to go work for him in his real estate practice with him and his father. And within less than 6 months, I was consulting with him on marketing his seminars, and eventually, through a whole chain of events, I became the co-host of the Real Estate Guys radio show in 2004. We ended up getting a TV show. We wrote our book, Equity Happens. We had our educational company. We started syndication businesses. We started a real estate development company. We had a referral brokerage company. And everything we touched turned to gold until 2008, where everything turned to crap.
Yep.
And I lost everything completely. And I realized in hindsight that I took my eye off the main thing. I got so caught up in everything I was doing. And so there was a whole story after that, but that was the genesis of it for me. I had a heart for Main Street. I could see the financial service industry wasn't servicing them well, and that really all the financial advisors out there were really just salespeople selling their vertical. Nobody was integrating. And that most of them were about Wall Street and paper assets, not real assets. Most of them were about fake equity and capital gains and not real wealth, which is cash flow. And when I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and ultimately, as you know, became good friends with Robert Kiyosaki, I began to realize that the answers were out there and people were hungry for them. And what they just needed was a system, a place to go, a community to belong to. And so after getting through all of the personal things I went through with my late wife's illness, I kind of circled back and said, okay, I'm going to get back to core mission. I'm going to take advantage of all of this wonderful technology that we have, all of these amazing relationships I've got, everything I've learned in business from the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm going to put it all together in a package, and I'm going to create an ecosystem to support Main Street's prosperity and liberty. And so now that's what I'm focused on. That's what I'm doing, and obviously that's what you're a part of too with me.
That is an incredible story, and there's so much to unravel there. From your story as starting as a young entrepreneur, then getting bloodied by 2008, but then getting back up, you, like Rocky Balboa, bouncing right off the mat and getting back up, and you just kept going and going and going. I think that's amazing. And there was one particular word that you said in there that kind of stuck out with me, repentance. And I know if you're going to take on a venture like this, you have to have some faith. You have to have some guidance. So what was that calling for you? Were you always a faith-filled man? Did you stray away? And how much has that implemented into your business and made you who you are today and got you to where the Main Street Media Network is and where your personal success and also business success is where it is today? Is that because of faith? And how big of a driver has it been for you?
So, big question. I was raised basically atheist or agnostic. We just didn't talk about it. So I didn't have any religious upbringing, never been to church, never read the Bible, didn't understand anything. We'd celebrate Easter, I didn't know what it was. We'd do Christmas, I didn't know what it was. These were just days, and I didn't know what any of these things meant. And in high school, I started dating a gal that ended up becoming my wife, and she took me to a young fellowship for high schoolers at a church, and everybody's going to hold hands, and I'm standing next to some dude, and he puts out his hand for me. I'm not going to hold your hand. I don't hold a man's hand. Get away from me, So I just was not into it. I thought I was basically a good person, but I was really given to selfishness. I didn't have anything throttling that. And if you take even a little bit of selfishness and feed it, it's going to end up in damaging relationships, reputations. It's going to create heartbreak.
Right.
And so I just wasn't a very good person. but I wanted to be a good person. I just didn't know how. And so after a few years of marriage and me not being a very good person, my wife at the time made the very wise decision to leave me. And that broke my heart. And with that broken heart, I remember one night lying on my bed, which I didn't even have a bed frame. I'm in this little apartment with my mattress on the floor. My life's a mess. And I just said, God, if there is a God and you hear me, show me what to do, because I feel like I'm 20 years old and I've already ruined the whole thing. Can I get like a reset? Right? That was my prayer. Didn't even know who I was praying to. I just thought, I'm completely outside of myself. And then through a series of circumstances, first thing I did is I went to work on my health, and I got rid of, some of the bad habits I had. And I started actually putting good ideas in my head. And then I asked my wife, we were estranged at the time, if she would entertain the idea of getting back together. And she said yes. And so she could see that I was really making an effort to be a good man. And then one day she went off to church, and I woke up and she's there getting dressed to go to church. And I said, where are you going? She goes, I'm going to church. I said, well, I'll come with you. You don't have to come. I know you don't like it. I go, no, I want to come. I want to come. And so I went. And I think I'm not even 20. I think I'm probably 21 years old. 21 years old. I've never been to church. I've never heard the gospel. And I'm sitting there, and I heard it for the very first time. And the altar call came, and I thought my heart was going to come out of my chest. But I was too proud. I didn't stand up, right? So I just stayed there. But I walked out. I go, wow, that was amazing. I want to come back next week. Next week I came and I had my guard all up. But I'm curious. Now I'm curious. And you give God curiosity, that he's going to get you.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? So I show up with curiosity. So I listen. I'm like, okay, the altar call comes, but I knew it was coming. And so it was like I didn't have that same pounding in my chest. So now we're having these big conversations. And so Saturday night, this third week, before the third Sunday in church, Saturday night, we're in our house, in our room, and I'm saying, I'm really starting to believe this idea that there could be a creator, there could be this benevolent being, that love is important, and there's more to life than just me and getting what I want.
Almost like an epiphany.
Yeah. It was like it was like the red pill. I was starting to see the way the world really is.
Right.
And it was like, but this devil business, like, that just sounds like creature feature. That just sounds like a monster movie. It was horns, and a tail.
Hooves and everything.
Teeth and, fire breathing fork tongue. Like, I don't know. I don't know. And she goes, no, you should be, you should be concerned about that. I'm like, no. So I go to church the next day. And the sermon was, why the devil doesn't want you to believe he's real.
Wow.
Put the fear of God in me. Man, when that altar call came, I couldn't stand up fast enough. And once I did and I really gave in, I wept for 45 minutes. They took me upstairs to this upper room. My poor wife is sitting there. She has no idea what's going on. I'm like gone for 45 minutes. She's like, did we just join a cult? What's going on here?
Right.
But they were up there praying for me, giving me a Bible, explaining to me the foundations of the faith. And for the next 25 years, like everything I did, and I think I'm still that way to a degree, everything I do with extreme intensity. And so I became very intense. I'm going to church 3 times a week. I'm doing home study. I'm reading the Bible. I'm listening to Christian songs, listening to Christian sermons. I mean, I just couldn't get enough. And that went on for 25 years. And then when the financial crisis came, my faith was really shaken by that, by betrayals, by people who I thought were good, godly people, by pastors that I watched were stealing from their congregations. I mean, I saw some stuff, and I was like, okay, I don't know if this is a community I want to be a part of. I still believed in God, And I still believed that I was created for a purpose. And I thought, I don't even really know who God is. He doesn't behave the way I thought he should behave. All of this bad stuff happening to me, I don't think should be happening. And it was a little bit of a pity party, to be honest. And in hindsight, I'm ashamed of it, but it's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really hard for my late wife because she stayed tight with the Lord and I didn't. I still believed. I stayed on purpose. I stayed on mission. I don't think I was a bad guy, but I felt like God, if you read in Romans 9, had created me as a vessel of dishonor to pour out his wrath on. And I thought, well, who's the pot to say to the, who's the clay to say to the potter, why have you made me thus? So I thought, well, if this is what he's made me for, it's my lot in life, I'm going to do it. So I just had this pity party thing going on.
Yeah, doubt creeping.
And it went on for about a dozen years.
Wow.
I'm glad it wasn't, 40 like Moses, but it went on for about a dozen years. And it was 2 years after my late wife died that I started to really begin to wonder why I lived, what am I here for, why did he take her when she loved life so much? And I was this sourpuss guy that was just, putting the time in, waiting to die, thinking God was against me. And he gave me a day, December 18th, 2021, which was a 2-year anniversary of burying her, where he spoke to me in a language that only I would understand. It's a very intricate way of communicating a message to me. And I won't bore you with the details of it. It's a fun story. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line was that my wife was fine. All the unfinished business, all the things that I planned to do someday, all the things that I had deferred in my entrepreneurial ventures, thinking someday I'd make enough money and make it up to her. He said, all those things that you promised, all those things that left unfinished when you held her in your arms and she died in your arms for the very, you held her for the very last time, all those things that you've been carrying around, he said, and this was the words I heard in my mind, he said, I got you. She's fine. She's fine. She's with me. She's happy. She's fine. Go become the man I created you to be. Do the work I put you here to do. And stay focused on that. I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. Wow. And there's more to the story because within just weeks, I met my current wife, the love of my life, and I would have thought that was impossible. I wasn't looking. I wasn't even looking, never dated. I had zero interest. And all of a sudden, like within a month, I'm madly in love and happy as can be. And she's the perfect woman for me. And she bought in hook, line, and sinker to my mission and what I'm doing. And she's been more supportive than anything I could have ever asked. And honestly, she's got a much better version of me than my late wife got because of what I learned and what I went through. And what I found out is my late wife and her were friends. And my late wife had assigned her the job of praying for me. She had been praying for me for years. God had given her a heart for me, and when her husband died, we weren't even interested in each other. I barely spoke with her. Now all of a sudden, we've got this common experience that we both lost our spouses. She knew what it's like to be married to a guy like me, an entrepreneur. And I knew that she could handle a guy like me because she was married to a guy like me. And all of a sudden, boom. And so that was the missing piece for me, and off to the races. And so I made a big decision to break up a business partnership because I felt that we had grown apart to a point where there wasn't enough overlap in mission,
Right.
vision, values. And I had a new life partner, and trying to reconcile loyalty to her, loyalty to God, loyalty to my former partner. I decided that my former partner had to exit the scene.
Yep.
And my focus is loyalty to God, and then my wife's loyalty to me and my mission and my loyalty to her. And that's where I'm at today. It just seems like now everything is really picking up steam. I don't think I've ever been more clear. I've ever been more focused. And literally my mountaintop time with him, with God, giving me the business model and exactly how to put this thing together in great detail. If you read, I think it's Exodus 24 or 25, Moses is writing the detail about how he put together the tabernacle. And I'm like, why did God take like 2 chapters to put all this detail? I'm not going to build a tabernacle.
Right.
Like, why would you really, that's a lot of real estate in the Bible to take up with just, but the phrase that jumped out with me, it was, be careful, be attentive to build according to the pattern I showed you on the mountain. And the mountain is where you would go to meet with God. So I was having all these mountaintop experiences in my quiet time with God, asking him to show me how to do this mission, to blueprint it in great detail. And I feel that he gave me all that detail. And now my charter, my charge, my commission is to build it according to what he showed me. And that's what I'm doing.
That is amazing. And there's tons to unpack there. I know for sure we won't have enough time to do so. But there's one specific thing that stands out to me about your faith, is that you did not take the victimization route. You had your pity parties, everyone does, but you pulled yourself by your bootstraps plus faith. I forget what passage it is, but you have to help yourself and God will also help you. You can't expect him to do all the work. You also have to do it yourself. And you did that exact thing where you turned to him, but you also turned to yourself and say, I need to get myself together. I need to be the best version of myself, my peak form. And when you did that, we could see, as you were telling the story, your progression, your evolution to the better self that you are today. And becoming the better self, you gain more clarity and you realize that you are made for a bigger purpose. You are a vessel, you are a tool of God. And now you are starting another venture. You realize that there are relationships and different things that were before that you're like, I'm out of alignment with. And you decided to part ways and go on the path that you were meant to be, that God has put you on. So thank you for sharing that. So what are you building right now? What has God called you to do to share the mission, share the values that he has and that you both share, right? And like, essentially, what are you building? What were the instructions or the blueprint that he was saying, go build this? What is that today?
Yeah, so I believe that walking with the Lord is a fairly simple concept. And it's the great commandment. The second commandment is like the first, and the Great Commission. So the Great Commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself, and go in the world and make disciples, right? That's the master's plan. And so anything that you want to do in life as a Christian has got to subordinate to that master's plan. So anything that doesn't fit that comes off the board. And so they're like guardrails, right? If I want to be 100%. In God's will, I've got to fit underneath that master's plan. Underneath that, there's a ton of diversity. So I have a thing called the purpose formula that you go through to try to figure out what you are passionate about, what you are providentially positioned to do, equipped to do. And there's some other things in the purpose formula that, I won't go into now. And then in business as an entrepreneur, the question is what problem are you trying to solve? So I'm running a soup kitchen for the affluent. In other words, in Luke, I think it is maybe in the middle of Luke, Jesus says, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. So there are people out there who feel that the end-all, be-all is this life, this world, and financial freedom is the ultimate. Next level up from that, as you know from hanging around with me, is political freedom. If we don't have political freedom, you can't enjoy your wealth.
Absolutely.
And so to me, I want people who come and say, hey, I want to learn how to be wealthy. Why do you want to be wealthy? I want to be free. Okay, well, let's talk about freedom. If you had $4 billion like Jack Ma, but you lived in communist China like Jack Ma, and you decided to use free speech to criticize a communist party like Jack Ma did, Jack Ma ended up getting re-educated, and his wealth couldn't buy him his freedom. So you can be rich and enjoy a lot of nice things, but you're not free. Our founders left their riches on the playing field in order to get liberty for themselves and their posterity. And so if you give me my freedom, I can always earn back my riches. But if you take my freedom, my riches are not as enjoyable. So that was the first part of it. But if you really begin to study the Constitution, which is the document that codifies our God-given freedom, our God-given liberty, right? Those rights are not given to us by the Constitution. They're given to us by God and protected by the Constitution. The author of the Constitution, or one of them, John Adams, said that our Constitution was designed for a religious and moral people and is completely inadequate for any other. In other words, you can't have freedom without morality. Because if you have freedom to do what you want and you want bad stuff, you're going to do bad stuff.
Right.
And society's answer is going to be to constrain your freedom so you can't do bad stuff. And once you go down that slippery slope, you get more and more and more laws. And so every time something bad happens in society, we want another law. Meanwhile, we continue to move down the path of immorality and wonder why we continue to lose our freedom. So that whole education is part of what I'm doing, which is what the Main Street Media Network is about, is talking about prosperity and liberty and empowering as many voices who have something to say in the area of prosperity and liberty to get that word out. Because thoughts and ideas become actions, and action becomes results. It's true in your life, but it's also true in society. So if we, as Main Street Media, and I don't mean my brand, I mean the movement of Main Street Media, don't take back, or we already have taken back, don't maintain and expand a message of hope and opportunity and morality, then bad ideas are going to be in the marketplace, which will lead to bad results, or bad actions, which will lead to bad results. So if I could distill my whole mission down into one statement, it is purpose-driven, Main Street capitalism powered by balance. Because I think that families are being destroyed on the poverty side because we give welfare to people so that men don't have to be men and provide for their families. And on the wealthy side, we do it from the standpoint of we sacrifice our families and our health and sometimes our morality on the altar of making enough money, because we think if we just have enough money that we can backfill all those problems. And that I had that same problem. When you hold your wife dying in your arms and she's only 59 years old and you thought you had at least another 20 years, you realize that there is no tomorrow. And I needed to be balanced along the way. Then you read Psalm 127, which says it's vain for the builder to build if the Lord's not in it. And that he gives his beloved sleep. So balance is part of God's plan. 6 days you shall work, and on the seventh you're going to rest. That's part of God's plan.
Absolutely.
So if you want to kind of tune into creation, people talk about circadian rhythms, right? If you want to be healthy, you have to tap into the natural cycles of sunlight and the rhythm of sleeping and all of that. Well, you know what? There's spiritual truths too. And if you don't tap into those rhythms, then that balance breaks. So people that are working 7 days a week, years on end, that's not going to end well. And even if they succeed in one area of their life, I'm going to probably suggest that the vast majority of them are failing in some other area of their life. So balance is important. On the front end of it, purpose. If I'm going to go create a business, what's the purpose of the business? Well,
Right.
To conduct myself in such a way that I honor God, right? Love God. Number two is to provide valuable goods and services and opportunities to other people. Love people in how I do my business. Love God, love people. The third one, make disciples. In other words, be attractive so people come and say, hey, what is it about you? What is it like this wisdom, this peace, this joy? Where does that come from? How can I get that? Right?
100%.
Financial freedom, political freedom, spiritual freedom. And the mission then is to create an army of people who are going to preach that gospel, if you will, of purpose-driven Main Street capitalism powered by balance. Teach them not just the philosophy, but the blocking and tackling of earning money, investing money, protecting money, and then raising children. I created the Raising Capitalists Foundation so I can take all of these brilliant people that I know and all the things that I've learned and all these great communicators that we're training up and have them begin to help young parents start businesses and bring their children into the workforce. There's nothing wrong with children being productive. They want to be productive. In today's society, they're capable of. I'm not talking about putting them in 12-hour sweatshops, in the industrial age. We're way past that.
Yeah.
Kids can be doing things with AI and computers and doing things and running portfolios and making decisions. And there's all kinds of things kids can be doing.
Absolutely.
And should be doing to learn what it is to be productive, to learn what it is to be efficient, to learn what it is to be of service, to earn and get that pride of ownership. When David had a chance to sacrifice, somebody said, "Here, let me give you the sacrifice." He goes, no. I'm not going to sacrifice something that didn't cost me something. I got to have skin in the game. Young people need to have skin in the game. You just give them things all the time. They grow up thinking they're entitled and life should just give them things. And when they get the right to vote, they go, I'm going to vote for free stuff, right? Because why wouldn't I? I mean, I was trained all my life that free stuff is the way the world works. So it's not the way the world works, right? Everything that you get for free, somebody else sacrificed for. And if you've never seen if you've never experienced that, you have no respect for it. And that's why capitalism has to go back and be Main Street again. And we have to take it all the way down to grade school and begin training our children what it is to be productive human beings who realize that when you create value, you receive value. And that's how you create prosperity and enjoy liberty.
Absolutely, and you touched upon a couple of things there, like for example, the education system. I'm a recovering student from the education system, and joining you and having the pleasure of working with you on the Main Street Media Network and launching my podcast and my brand, along with the Raising Capitalists Foundation and what you're trying to teach, it all makes sense because it's exactly what I did 3 years ago, was go my own way, not to reference Fleetwood Mac by some random reason, but to basically start my own path, create my own future, like ownership. And I realized that what I was being taught in school, I'm walking away with nothing except to figure out, well, this is an onomatopoeia and y equals mx plus b. When am I going to use that? I don't know anything about financial literacy. I don't know anything about taxes. I don't know anything about depreciation. How do you even make a signature? I don't even know how to do that. Why? And I realized that it's people like you and me that have the vision to rebuild middle America, Main Street America, and to start teaching those that are younger than me, because I'm 20. So for that age gap, I'm on the older spectrum now. So, and I want to join that bandwagon because I don't want my kids to go through the same, appalling program that I went through with the public education system, but I won't go down the rabbit hole. But there's something you touched upon way earlier in our interview, vulture capitalists.
Yeah.
And I love that because it's true. I mean, you see like companies like Vanguard and BlackRock, and they squeeze the middle America more and more and more, and you realize that like it was unclean money, where it's like very egotistical, like who you are, Boy Scout, right? And you went off and you want to do something greater. And I think that mission of Main Street America, Main Street investing and ownership should be more pronounced. I think it should be more out there, but
it's very important now, if I can interject.
Absolutely.
Because what you've got is 40+% of the small businesses right now are owned by boomers. And those boomers are going to be divesting themselves of those businesses. Some of them are going to get taken over by their kids, but many are going to get sold. Now, the boomers who are real smart are going to package those businesses up to be sold. But sadly, what's going to happen is some private equity firm is going to purchase them.
Yep.
And it goes through a two-step process. The first purchase is I'm going to cash out the owner, let them hang around long enough so I get a little bit of continuity. But I'm going to go in there and I'm going to optimize that thing for profit. And so there's going to be a lot of things that happen, some good, but some bad. And now that the thing is just hitting on all 8 cylinders, there isn't an ounce of productivity to be squeezed out of it. It is a tight really, really valuable machine. So now I'm going to sell it the second round and cash out, because that's how that PE firm makes its money, right? It's like a rehabber. I'm going to buy it from the lazy landlord. I'm going to tighten it up and get it all the way to peak performance. And then I'm going to go out and I'm going to lever it to the gills, sell it to somebody who's going to lever it to the gills in a one cap market, right?
Yep.
And then now that apartment building, in this case, you know, mixing the analogy because I know you're a multifamily.
Yep.
Zero margin for error. If those expenses go up, if those rents go down, if interest rates move, it's a train wreck. And we've seen a lot of people in multifamily go through that because because of, you know, how tight multifamily got when interest rates were super low and everybody and their brother was piling in. Well, see, that's what happens with the business. And so you see these perfectly good businesses that get sold on the second sale to a leveraged buyout firm. And if this firm hiccups, the business hiccups, it goes broke. And you're watching good, solid Main Street businesses today
collapse,
go out of business. And that means that amenity, that product, that service is no longer available for Main Street. Those jobs are no longer available on Main Street. Now, the guys who put the deal together, they made their profit, they made their M&A fee, and they're happy. And so I go back to this rant I had earlier when I had you on my show, and we recorded that, and that is, it's just ridiculous that Main Street earns real profit by doing real work, sends their money to Wall Street and lets Wall Street put it in the casinos, turn right around and go back and purchase Main Street businesses, gut them through leveraged buyouts, and then leave Main Street holding the ball. They do these derivative and super speculative trading in these too big to fail firms, and then when they fail, right, either they're going to get a direct bailout, which is paid for by printed money, which is inflation, and all the people on Main Street are paying for this inflation because this money comes and bails them out, you know, or they end up getting more loans and more inflation. And so it's just a constant stream of naive Main Street creating real value and then handing it over to these monopolies who actually use the very power we give them to make our lives worse.
Isn't it like 70 trillion that's in like Wall Street from like Main Street capital?
70 trillion of Main Street savings investment on paper anyway, based on equity, is in Wall Street.
It's
retirement. And so we need to take that back. And so I love what you're doing, right? Because you're showing people, hey, hedge. Yeah, I'm going to do a talk next week about this, and my topic is how to use Main Street to hedge Wall Street. When you're out there trying to raise capital and you're trying to compete with these bubbles that go on in Wall Street, you know, and you show somebody, well, this is, you know, an 8% cash on cash and with, you know, modest equity growth and amortization, and, you know, in 10 years we're going to have maybe a 12% return. And they're like, oh, that's boring. I don't want that. Look, I can go buy NVIDIA and I can go, you know, buy Mag 7 and I can have this amazing, except that cuts the other way, right? You can watch the whole thing disappear.
Exactly.
And so the idea is the time to convince people to hedge against what's going on Wall Street is when Wall Street's fat. The problem is nobody wants to listen. So there's an educational process to get people to understand what putting a hedge on looks like. And when you invest in a hedge funds don't hedge anymore. The original hedge funds, the guy that started the hedge fund in 1949, the whole purpose was to mitigate risk. Today, hedge funds are all about optimizing or maximizing return by instituting a lot of risk.
Exactly.
They're using options and leverages and derivatives and all kinds of things, and people, they're not hedging anything.
Yeah.
They're taking a lot of risk. And sadly, Main Street, because of the lack of real financial education and literacy, they don't understand the risks that they're taking. And even worse, that they don't understand they're empowering the people that literally have been gutting Main Street for decades. Now, Scott Bessent, the current Secretary of the Treasury, has said on more than a couple occasions that the current administration is not an administration for Wall Street, it's an administration for Main Street. Now, that could just be, you know, pandering, vote pandering. I look at, you know, what they say, but I really watch what they do. But I have seen some things done by this administration and things that they've attempted to do that have been a little stonewalled that I think are really ultimately going to be good for Main Street. So I'm very bullish on Main Street. I'm very bullish on the next generation. I am very bullish on America. And I really do believe that some of our best days are in front of us if Main Street takes the ball and runs through the holes that the big guys are blocking and creating. I think we've got some big people in positions of power that are attempting to open up Main Street. But if we don't start businesses, if we don't buy those businesses from the boomers and optimize them for profitability,
That window will close quick.
but don't flip them to Wall Street. If you
Yep.
want to cash out, flip them to somebody on Main Street. And Main Street investors have to quit swinging for the fences. I think that building resilient wealth based on real productivity is going to be a winning formula versus building paper wealth based on fake equity. And I could do a whole dissertation on why so much equity out there is fake.
Right.
But productivity, cash flow, profits, that's real. And if you focus a portfolio on that, in my opinion, it may not be as sexy and you may not have the big net worth, but you'll be able to pay the bills and you will be able to weather the storm.
Absolutely, well said. And I'm bullish with America too, and middle America, Main Street America, because it really is time for the tables to turn. Wall Street's had its fill, now it's time for ours. But I'm not going to go in that rabbit hole because we're just about to wrap up. Russell, because your mission, our mission, because we share the same values, share the same mission, we're trying to do something huge. And I know there's millions of Americans out there that want to support the same mission, but they don't know how. So how can people support the Main Street cause that you are presenting, and how can they potentially reach out to you, and how can they support the mission at hand?
Well, I mean, I think the best way is just to follow, because ideas, requests, opportunities will come out. If you send an email to follow@russellgray.com, RUSSELLGRAY.com, or follow@russellgray.com, then everything I'm doing, my foundation, the Investor Mentoring Club, the Main Street Media Network, my show, Main Street Capitalist, the Christian Capitalist Show, everything that I'm involved in, everything I'm doing, if you're following me, you're going to hear about it. You can selectively follow some things and forget others. You may not agree with me on everything. If you don't like what I'm saying, if you think I'm crazy, send me that too. I'd love to have that conversation. But follow@russellgray.com.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard from the best of the best. And also, if you want to see more of our episodes and more of these in the future, please like and follow. Please repost, because we need to get this mission out there. If you want to learn more about what Russell Gray is doing, check the description below along with the bio of the episode, and check out my social media too. You can follow us there, the Main Street Media Network, along with the Raising Capitalists Foundation, and much, much more of what Russell Gray is producing along with us in partnership. Anyways, to my audience out there, thank you so much for listening. This has been the Ever Forward Mindset Podcast. Build yourself better and bigger every day. Live better, live bigger. Always move ever forward. Russell, thank you so much for your wisdom. Thank you so much for your time. And let's build up Middle America.
Thanks, Michael. Proud of you.